Hello and welcome to video 7, which explains bonds and interest rates. Under the current economic setup, there is a belief that the interest rate are an important parameter and they want to manage it carefully, moving it up and down or holding it at a constant level for time. For what it's worth, modern monetary economics doesn't think much of interest rates and will be fine with the overnight cash rate. It is also known as the interbank lending rate, being 0%. Note that modern monetary economics does still think home loan rates or car loan rates should be above 0%, but these are mostly dominated by private sector interest rate management anyway. In this video, we'll look at how interest rates are managed. To do this, I've made up a diagram to help understand it. So I have a circle which marks out the economy. In our economy, we have two banks, B1 and B2, and the Reserve Bank of Australia. Bank B1, you'll notice, has $120 of loans and $12 of reserves. Bank B2 has $80 of loans and $8 of reserves. To the top left of the picture, you will see two things: the interbank lending interest rate target, which is set at 1%, and a reserve ratio requirement of 10%. Looking back at B1, you'll see its reserves are 10% of its loans. $12 is 10% of 120. And the same with Bank B2. It has reserves that are 10% of its loans. So this sets the scene for the three scenarios we are going to look at, which keep the interbank lending rate where the government wants it. Scenario 1 is a simple bank-to-bank transfer which occurs when there is no overall drive of interest rates up and down. Scenario 2 is what happens to stop interest rates rising, and Scenario 3 is what happens to stop interest rates falling, and it's this last one that includes the bonds. Okay, so the next day we find our two banks have changed the amount of loans each has on its books. B1 now has $100, as does B2. Note that B1 still has $12 of reserves, which is in an excess, whereas B2 only has $8, and that's a deficit, since it needs $10 to satisfy its 10% reserves requirement. So what B2 needs is $2, and B1 has $2 in excess. So B1, being a typical bank looking for money, loans a spare $2 of reserves to B2 at the target interest rate. Although B1, being a typical bank, might like to charge more than 1%, it can't do this, as B2 will go to the Reserve Bank and they will loan at the government's target rate of 1%. So both banks end up with $10 of reserves and satisfy their reserve requirements, and this ends a typical day in the world of banking and interest rates. Scenario 2 is a bit less typical. In this one, we'll see what happens to cause interest rates to tend to rise and how the government counteracts this. This time we'll see both banks starting off with $120 in loans, but each only has $10 of reserves still, so both are short $2 of reserves to meet their 10% reserve requirement ratio. Overall, the system is $4 short of reserves. In this case, with no intervention by the Reserve Bank, the banks will offer higher interest rates to whoever they can in the market in order to try and source the reserves they need to comply with the reserve requirement. If the interest on reserves goes higher, then the banks pass that on to all the other loans they do. So home loan rates, personal loan, business loan rates would all go higher. So in order to control the interest rates on reserves where they want it, the Reserve Bank, on behalf of the government, lends reserves to the banks at the interest rate target the government wants to keep. And this keeps the interest rates where the government wants it. In this case, each bank gets $2 at 1% interest rate and everyone is happy again. In Scenario 3, we have the opposite situation to Scenario 2. There isn't a shortage of money for reserves, there's an excess floating around in the economy. Some return is better than no return, so the excess money holders say to B1, I'll give you that $12 of reserves you need, but I'll only charge you 0.9% interest. The bank says, sweet, because $12 of reserves at 0.9% interest is less cost to it than $12 at 1% was. But now B1 actually has $24 in reserves, so he wants to offload the excess $12 it has. It knows Bank B2 needs $12 in reserves and that it's paying 1% interest on it, so it knows it has to offer the $12 cheaper than 1%, so B1 sells its reserves to B2 at 0.95%. B2 thinks, sweet, then it will try and offload its reserves, excess reserves, etc., and you can see how excess money in the economy drives the interest rates down below the government's target rate. So in order to solve this problem, the government needs to remove the excess money from out of the economy. It does this by selling bonds. In my example, it offers 2%, so they can get more return this way than from selling to the banks where they can only get 0.9%. This bond selling process removes the excess money out of the economy, leaving just the word money to indicate normal economy money and not excess, and this keeps the interest rate where the government wants it. So there you have it. The main reason bonds get sold is to help control the interest rate where it is wanted by the government, not to raise money. Now, many people will tell you different, including the politicians and the government. However, banking insiders and anyone who cares to do a careful analysis of what actually goes on inside Treasury and the Reserve Bank will tell you it's as per the description I've given here. I hope this has helped to explain about bonds and interest rates. Thanks for watching and listening.